Good evening. My name is Jake Sullivan and this is my audience. Today I'm going to be discussing the increasing controversial topic of human euthanasia, also known as physician-assisted suicide. According to Dalbiging and Manning, euthanasia is a common medical practice that dates all the way back to ancient Rome and Greece, where the Romans and Greeks first began to tolerate this. Over time, various other groups such as Jews and Catholics began to oppose it. Euthanasia, or physician-assisted suicide, is commonly known as a practice of mercy killing. It is a painless way of killing a patient who has an incurable and oftentimes painful disease, or someone who has an irreversible coma. Euthanasia is most commonly practiced by a lethal dose of medication via pills or injections. Many argue that a terminally ill patient is not in a stable state of mind, and therefore should not be allowed to determine their fate. However, I believe that if someone is truly suffering from an incurable disease or condition, that they are still mentally stable, they should be able to choose whether or not they want to die. It has been argued by the U.S. Supreme Court opinion in Washington versus Glucksberg that one may not have assistance in committing suicide because it is not fundamentally liberty protected by the Due Process Clause, a principle that the government must respect all of the legal rights that are owed to a person. Yet, if the patient is in fact terminally ill, but still mentally capable of making a decision, and is cognizant of what they are asking for, then it is their human right to be able to choose a quick death over a long, painful road to their inevitable death. In a list of basic human rights listed by the United States in Article 3, everybody has the right to life. This human right makes sense when applied to DNR, or do not resuscitate, order which allows a patient to decide whether he or she would like to receive CPR or ACLS if either their heart or their breathing has not ceased. This being said, when a patient chooses euthanasia, why is it all of a sudden a problem? Euthanasia and the do not resuscitate order are the same in the sense that they ultimately come to the same outcome. Being a decided death is achieved by the patient's own decision. A popular story that was all over the news a few years ago is the life and death of Brittany Maynard, a 29-year-old woman who moved from California to Oregon so that she could die with dignity. In January of 2014, Brittany Maynard was diagnosed with stage 2 brain cancer, but in April, this brain cancer had progressed to stage 4. She was given 6 months to live. Maynard, not wanting to have a prolonged and painful death, but wanting to choose her time of death, moved to Oregon, where the Death with Dignity Act is legal. On November 1st, 2014, Brittany Maynard passed away peacefully in the arms of her husband while surrounded by immediate family members, and close friends. In an interview prior to her passing, Maynard described her reasoning for choosing a death via lethal injection as prescribed by her doctor. She states that she wanted to die when it was her choice, not cancer's. Another argument against euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide has often been referred to as a slippery slope to legalizing murder. This ultimately means that many people find that if these actions are legalized, then this will lead to an unethical way of legal murder. Also, this is a logical fear and actual possibility unless the patient receiving the euthanasia or assisted suicide gives the consent and the right to the killing of their own body, then it is unlawful to do so and is considered murder. Much like in Brittany Maynard's case, where she is the one who initially requested that this be the way that she died, in no instance would it be legal for physician's assisted suicide to be performed without consent. With strict laws and heavy enforcement upon those laws, euthanasia and physician's assisted suicide becomes easier to control and restrict. Others may also argue that the legalization of euthanasia and physician's assisted suicide violates the Hippocratic Oath. The Hippocratic Oath is an oath written by the ancient Greek doctor Hippocrates. The doctor must say, and that may tend to follow. This oath touches on the subject of sick patients and how the doctor must handle these situations. and the Hippocratic Oath, it does in fact instruct physicians not to give deadly drugs to patients. While this is true, many tend to forget the fact that this was written somewhere between 400 BC and 377 BC. The Hippocratic Oath does not take into consideration the subject of a patient's suffering and receiving a lethal drug upon request of that patient. If the patient wishes so, then they should be able to choose to have the drug to end their suffering. All in all, there is a mentally stable patient who is terminally ill and suffering, much like Brittany Maynard, and they wish to end their life at the time of their choice, avoiding prolonged suffering to this mental, physical, and emotional state, then this is one of the best, or one of their human rights to decide upon this and the outcome of their body. Although restrictions against the actions of euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide are not intended to make patients suffer, people all over the world are suffering. These suffering people know what they want, and it is one of their personal human rights to be allowed to do what they would like with their own body as long as they are mentally capable. Thank you.